Welcome everyone to Live from My Drum Room. My guest today is the great Cindy Blackman Santana, a dear, dear friend of mine for over 30 years. I'm so happy to have Cindy on the show today with me, and excited to talk to her and catch up. Cindy is a virtuoso drummer who's equally comfortable leading her own jazz band as she is powering a rock band. She's well known for her 17 years playing with Lenny Kravitz, and since 2016, being the backbeat, the drummer for Carlos Santana's band. And Carlos Santana, of course, being her husband. Well, but Cindy's jazz cred is really deep. She's got incredible credentials as a jazz musician, as a leader, reads as a who's who in the jazz world, including a tribute to her mentor, the late, great Tony Williams, who we'll talk a lot about as well. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, the one and only Cindy Blackman Santana. All right. You hearing that audience response, Cindy? Are you hearing that?
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah. Got a big crowd. Got a big crowd watching today. So
I love it.
I have to tell you, I just got this Zoom. I have to give a shout out to the people at Zoom. I just got this Zoom PodTrack 8 podcast interface, and I'm learning how to use it as we go. So thanks for letting me fool around with it today.
Awesome.
It's so great to see you. Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. It's great to see you too, and thanks for the invite. I'm really honored.
Oh, the honor is truly mine, Cindy. You've been at the top of my list for a long time, and I know we've sort of gone back and forth. You've been so busy, and I'm just glad we could finally land on a date, and here we are today. So thank you.
Me too. I'm glad too. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So you're in San Francisco. Is that where you guys are spending most of your time now, or?
Actually, right now we're in Las Vegas.
You're in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Currently we do not live in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. So we're spending time between Las Vegas and Kauai. I
see. Well, two beautiful spots. I'd pick Kauai over Las Vegas, but that's just me. That's
you're not alone.
No offense to the folks living in Las Vegas, but yeah, no, that's okay. That's good. You have a good mix of your world, you know.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's definitely an opposite thing, you know, in terms of just the weather. You know, when you're in Kauai, everything is so lush and so rich and so moist, and you know, the rain is incredible. One day, about a month and a half ago, we had 6 inches of rain in 1 hour.
Wow.
I mean, it's just, and it shows in all of the foliage, all of the crops, you know, the plants, the trees, everything is just so gorgeous and so healthy, you know, and then you come to Las Vegas and it's completely dry.
Dusty. Yeah. Well, that's, yeah. It sounds beautiful in Kauai. Yeah.
It is. And, you know, there's something to be said about the desert though. I mean, it's very calm, you know, very windy at this point because this is the windy season, but you know, it's really calm here. So when you come here, it's puts you in a different kind of meditative spot. Although, you know, nothing beats Kauai.
Well, I was saying off the air, and I'll say it to everybody watching, that I wore this shirt just for you. You know, the team shirt.
Go Gretsch.
Yeah, go Gretsch. Yeah, I can't not think of you and our friend Tony, and you know, I mean, that's just well, I can never think of you without thinking of Tony, being reminded in some way, just because of, you know, the history and the friendship and the love and everything. So.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. I'm in my meditative room right now, and this I call my Tony Williams room. So I'm in the room. I mean, we have other friends too. You know, Miles is in here. Kenny Clark is in here, and Papa Joe and Max, and some of the greats are in here. But this is the Tony Williams room.
That's great. That's great. I made a note. I was going to sort of get to it a little bit later, but I'm going to just say it because I think, and maybe you've heard this before from other people, Cindy, but I think you've been really, really, without even trying to do this, you've helped expose like a generation of people to Tony that probably would not have been exposed to him. And I have to think other people have told you this, that you've people that love the way you play, and you have your own style, obviously, but what you do is such a great tip of the hat to Tony, as you've said many times, and I just think it's wonderful that you're helping to carry that on, for future generations. It's so important.
Well, if it's working out that way, that's an incredible thing, because his contributions, and I say plural, were so incredible and so important and so necessary and needed. If you want to go to the School of Drumming, then you can just study that one guy and you can get it all, because he studied everybody, and he figured out how to interject in his way, the most phenomenal things from each of those people that he studied, each of those masters that he studied, from what he got from Kenny Clark, from Baby Dodds all the way, to Lou Hayes, all the cats that he studied and everybody in between, it's in there. So you're hearing the lineage and the history of the drums when you hear Tony play, and it doesn't matter what genre he's playing, what style he's playing, you hear that history. And to me, that's important, because we have to understand where we came from. And you don't have to try to play like Tony or try to play like any of these people, but to understand what that lineage is, why certain things happened, how did it develop that, we started playing a 4-limb style, where did this riff come from, or that riff come from in the music, so it's not even just about what he did dramistically, technique and all that stuff, which is just in sound, which is just, he just gave way more than any other person was ever, expected to give, but then when you listen to what he did in the music, conceptually, it just takes it to another plateau. So, to me, he's a person who is a must acknowledge, I don't care what kind of music you play, but he's a must acknowledge. And to me, he's a must study, depending on, how far you want to get into this thing of the world of drumming, and if you really are serious, then to me, that's one person that you can't avoid.
Well said. Yeah, well said. And I think, to me, it's like, even when he wasn't composing a song, he was composing a drum part. Like, so many of the things that he played as a sideman, whether it was with Miles Davis or just, could be with a rock band or a fusion band, but he was composing these parts that were just that, compositions. And I've discovered Tony a little later in life than you did. And I just remember it like opening my eyes and opening all these doors, and all of a sudden, all these other people that I'd been listening to made more sense to me, and it was probably different for you, because I think, and I was going to ask you, I know you discovered Max really young. Was he like your first, kind of the first person to get that sort of open that door to jazz to you?
He was, yes, he was.
Yeah.
And we had a drummer friend in our family, a family friend who played with Jackie McLean, Doug Woods. And he said, you have to check out some Max Roach. So he wrote out a pattern, which was, 4-way pattern of triplets in the left hand, 2 and 4 on the sock cymbal, 4/4 feathered lightly on the bass drum, and, playing a ride pattern in the right hand. And I was like, huh? Because everything that I heard before was all 3-limb style, which was great, but that was like my first, foray into the world of jazz drumming. And so yeah, that was Max Roach.
Yeah, yeah. And then, and how, so, and so when you discovered Max, you'd already been playing a while anyway. So you already had some of the fundamentals together as far as playing. Like you say, you're used to playing 3-limb approach. You like a teenager when you discovered Max?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I was 13.
13.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how much, well, we're roughly the same age. So I know, like that, how important those people can be, at that time of your life too. And, those formative years, but you had already been playing a number of years, I know, before that. So you probably, I'm guessing the concept came to you pretty easily. You were able to kind of, understand it, comprehend it, and play it.
I was able to comprehend it,
Yeah.
and I definitely could understand it here. And once I put it, to application here, on the drums, I was like, oh, okay, this is opening. That's where that sound that I'm hearing on this record is coming from. Okay, that's what this person's doing. And then it just opened up my whole understanding, And it's funny because I heard Elvin after I heard Max, and then I heard Art Blakey after I heard Elvin. So I thought that Art Blakey came from Elvin.
Yeah, no, that's
My naivete as a child, I didn't know, and then the more I studied, and then a grown-up kind of laughed at me, and the more I studied, I was like, oh, okay, Art is the daddy of everybody. Everybody got to pick Webb. He's the daddy. Okay, I get it.
Oh, that's great. Well, so do you remember about how old you were when you first heard Tony? Like, and what was it, a Miles Davis record? Whatever it was that you heard that sort of flipped that switch for you?
Yes, I was also 13. It was later that year.
Okay.
I heard Max earlier in the year, and then my older sister, and I say older just to make set the picture in motion. She was singing at the time. She was a singer, and she had a friend who was a guitar player. So all these people are, my seniors, but she had a friend who's a guitar player, and this guy said, hey, if you're really, really serious about the drums, then you need to check it. Actually, I wasn't 13. I think it wasn't until I was 15. I think it was about 15 when I really was aware of Tony. And this guy was like, you got to check out the guy who's the greatest drummer that ever lived. I said, okay. And so he took me to his house and he set me down in his basement. He and his family were upstairs eating or doing something, I don't know what. And he put on records. And after the first record was over, he came down and he said, well, what did you think of that? And I said, my mind is blown. Yeah. Who was that? And he said, this drummer, he said, guess the age of the drummer. And I was guessing all these ages, that sounded right to me at 15. Right. And he said, no, this drummer is 16 on this record. And I was like, 16? I was stuttering. And it was 4 and more. Yeah. So he played 4 and more for me. And then he played live in Europe. And that evening just really blew my mind. I was talking about that drummer that I heard to anybody who would listen or not. I didn't care if you were listening. I was saying it. I was just talking about this drummer. And so I was trying to find, everything I could to hear this drummer. And this other person who's a musician in the town I lived, I was in West Hartford at that time. This guy says, the drummer that you keep talking about, he's doing a clinic on Sunday in Wethersfield at Creative Music, which was Bob Gadsden's shop.
Sure, yeah.
And, are you going to go? And I said, oh, well, how much does it cost? And he said, $25. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot of money for me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I begged my mom, and she, she was a single mom, just working hard to make sure that her kids were okay. She didn't have any extra money at all, but she gave me the money, and so I was able to go see Tony, and then that really just floored me. After seeing that clinic, I was just on a whole other plateau in terms of what my concept was going to turn into, what my goals were, and what to me drumming was.
Yeah. Yep. I had a similar experience. I had a cousin who was like a second cousin. My dad's cousin was the father of this guy, so I guess it makes him my second cousin anyway. He's a few years older than me and was a horn player. And I think I was about maybe 15 or 16, and we were at a family event at their house, and he played me. He knew I was into all these rock bands. This would have been like 1976, 1977, and played me Tony Williams. And he had some Buddy Rich stuff that and I was familiar with Buddy because, of course, you could see him on The Tonight Show, but I didn't know who Tony was. And he kind of said the same thing, like, not in a like, he didn't make me feel stupid, but he's like, you don't know who Tony Williams is? Like, no, I don't. He's like, you got to hear this guy play. And it was so like groundbreakingly different to my brain, at that time. And he let me borrow the records, and like I really sort of did a deep dive at that time. And it was just such a left turn, from everything. And then I was just going to say, years later, I was working at a drum shop at a music store in Boston in 1982, and we had Tony in for a clinic. And I was so nervous around him. and because it was Boston, his I believe his mom, I know he had family there with him. And the Gretsch rep kind of brought him in and took him out afterward. I only got to say hello to him, and but it was just, and the guys that were going to Berklee at the time, I just missed you. I think you might have already gone to Berklee and left by the time I was working at Wurlitzer, but Smitty and Jeff Watts were students at Berklee, and so I met those guys and became friends. And Tane and I were just talking about it recently, the Tony Clinic. It was, it was just mind-blowing for everybody. And it was just like all these people just kind of with their mouths open, maybe who'd never seen him play before, but yeah.
Yeah, I was in Berklee when those guys were there, but by 1982, I was long gone. I was already in New York at that time. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Yeah.
It's amazing, and I know you have a deep reverence and love for Tony because we've shared some some great moments. Yeah. So yeah, I love that you respect him like that. It's he's the man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I wanted to just really, I just wanted to say thank you because I really see that out there. I think your influence on a generation of people is so important, and I think what you can share to what you can kind of convey to people is the lineage, your love for Tony and how he was a mentor for you, and how that can, you can extend that to another generation. I just think it's so great.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, kudos, Cindy. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about. I know you went to Berklee for a little while, and you studied with Alan Dawson, who also was Tony's teacher. So, how was that? I would love to just get a, sort of an overview of what it was like to Did you pick Alan's brain on? Not that you'd pick his brain about Tony, but did you go there with the idea of like trying to get some of the concepts that, and not to make this all about Tony, I'm not trying to do that either. I'm realizing I am, but.
It's hard not to, it's hard not to, and I'll answer that. But it reminds me of this story that Billy Hart told me one time. He said that there was this tribute to Philly Joe, and he said that all the drummers were playing, and he said, "Wow, I was trying to play something different, and I realized that's from Philly Joe." He said, and then I was trying to play something else that was different from what everybody else was playing, and I realized that's from Philly Joe. It's like couldn't get away from that influence. So you can't get away from Tony, it's okay, no problem. But yeah, what was your question?
No, I know you studied with Alan while you were in Boston at Berklee, and I didn't know if he shared any of the concepts that he and Tony had, or.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, we actually never spoke about that, and I only took 2 lessons from Alan. when I went to Alan, he was not teaching at Berklee. And I was
Right.
already out of Boston. So I was living with my mom in Hartford, Connecticut. So I commuted back to his house
Oh,
because I
okay.
heard that he was teaching at his house.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, I got to get his number. And Wallace gave me his number. He found the number for me. And I was like, I got to call him today. And I called him, and, you know, I went for the first lesson, and he knew I was commuting. So I have to say one thing about him. Not only was he an incredible drummer and teacher, but
Yeah.
he was such an amazing person, so sweet and thoughtful, because he knew that I was commuting, a couple hour, 2-3 hour drive, whatever it was, from Hartford to his house. And so when I got there, instead of starting to play right away, he said, "Oh, I want you to just sit down and relax." And he said, "And I made you a sandwich." So he gave made me something to eat. He gave me a sandwich and some juice or something. It was so sweet. And I was looking at him like, wow. I mean, he really floored me in every respect. Such a gentleman. I have only incredible things to say and remember about my times with Alan. And they weren't many, but, it was really just very impactful. And, he just asked me what I wanted. And I said, I want better independence. I want, better and cleaner technique. And he says, okay, I got you. So, he had me read through syncopation, and he had me do these exercises. And when I made a mistake, he said, okay, we're going to start there. So that's where we started, when I made a mistake. And then he gave me his ritual.
Yeah.
And by the time I came back for the second lesson, I already knew the ritual, because I was working on that thing like crazy. I mean, I had to read it, but I didn't have it totally committed to memory. But I had played through those 11 pages,
Wow. Yeah.
time. And he was like, "Wow, okay." And he later told Wallace. He didn't tell me this, but apparently Wallace said that he told him that two people learned it that fast. One was our hero, and I was the second.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's really complete, but that's what I was told. So yeah, and he said, I don't really know what you want me to teach you, because you're already playing, you're a professional. I said, yeah, but I have to be better. I want to learn more. I have to get deeper into the way to play the drums, and basically that was it, and then he told me to play the ritual sometimes with brushes. And those were our lessons. Like I said, I was only able to take 2 from him.
Wow.
Yeah.
But very impactful. Yeah. And,
Completely. Yeah.
And so your reading must have been, by the time you studied with Alan, your reading was probably really good, I'm guessing, right?
At that time, it was really good. At this time, it's not so much.
Well, no, understandably, but
17 years of Lenny, and where there's no note in sight that you had to read, I just got lazy, But at that time, no diss on Lenny. I'm just saying that there wasn't that kind of gig,
Yeah.
But it was really good at that time, and I still go through those books, and I still, I don't practice the ritual as much as I should, probably, but I still practice the ritual. I still do the exercises, and try to come up with some variations on the exercises, that work for me, and so it's still a huge impact, and still a huge help, for me. Just those 2 lessons that I experienced with Alan.
That's great. Wow. That's wonderful that you can take that away and say that today, that those lessons still, benefit you today. That's what more could you ask for, And I didn't know him well. I got to know him a little bit toward the end of his life when I first started at my time at Zildjian, and you summed him up perfectly. From my the couple of times he came down to the office, to the factory, just a gentleman, and a living legend at the time, obviously, and as a player, as a drummer in Boston, and as a teacher. He was unparalleled. I think there are a lot of great players who teach and a lot of great teachers who play, but I don't know that there's ever going to be somebody like Alan Dawson to come down the pike. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
I asked about your reading because a friend of mine, Alan, lived in Lexington, Mass, and a friend of mine studied with him, a really good drummer, and I thought, well, I was getting some lessons from him on how to learn to read music, but it was very early days, and I wanted to apply to Berklee, and I knew I had to have some reading to go to Berklee, and I called Alan Dawson for lessons, and when he asked me if I could read music, or it came up, we actually spoke on the phone, and I told him I was just learning to read, and he basically said, then come back when you can read music, and it bummed me out, but I realized I was too young and dumb to realize it would have been a waste of obviously his time and my time to study with a master like Alan and not be, prepared to absorb, to learn what he was going to teach me. So I
Well, you would have to prep to study with him because, that's the upper echelon, it's like going to study calculus. You have to go through the steps prior to calculus to get to studying calculus, So, I mean, I had taken drum lessons in high school and I went to college prep classes for snare drum studies, drum set studies, and traditional harmony at Hart College of Music before I got to Berklee. So there were some things that I had already been exposed to, before getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big help for me as well. It helped my ear, it helped my eyes, it was a big help in terms of me understanding and being able to grasp the stuff quicker, because that's what reading is. It's about being able to, fill up your Rolodex with other choices, with many choices, and to be able to, gather information quickly, to be able to, go through songs quickly, and to understand, form and, and such. It's all a part of it. Now we know some people who couldn't read a note. And it doesn't mean that they weren't excellent musicians, but I think that, when you study, I think it just gives you much more to draw from, and it just makes your whole bag of choices so much bigger. And that's what we want. Well, that's what I want. I want choices. So yeah, after this conversation, I'm going to kick myself back into gear. Thanks, Johnny. Johnny D.
Cindy, it's so great to see you. I miss you like crazy. And we've had so many great times. And I just have to say, and there are so many people watching this and so many beautiful comments about you. But you're always in gear. I can't imagine you ever not being the Cindy Blackman Santana that I know, and love.
Well, I like to push, and like you do, you don't sit still. You're a doer. You get things done. I know that because I've worked with you.
Thank you.
And I'm the same way. I like to get things done. I like to stay on top of my game. So this is good. I love inspiration, and you are inspired.
Well, good. Well, you're inspiring me too. I have to tell you. And so I'm going to just jump back a little bit to, you mentioned you'd already moved to New York, by the 80s. You'd left Berklee and you were living in New York, and I know we met. By my recollection, 1992. I was thinking it was before you started playing with Lenny, and so you really had kind of immersed yourself into the New York jazz scene for like a solid decade, probably before like you got the gig with Lenny and
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that wasn't a gig that I was looking for or expecting to do.
Right.
I wasn't even thinking about going in that direction. I wanted to play with Miles. I wanted to play with, with Herbie or Wayne, and Freddie Hubbard. These are the people that I wanted to play with. So I wasn't even thinking about a gig like that. And I mean, by the grace of God, it did some great things for me, as a person, and it was a great thing to experience as a player too, and then just to be able to travel and do all those world tours and all the playing that we did. I mean, we logged in thousands of hours playing together. So it was amazing, but I wasn't looking for that actually.
Right. No, and I want to talk to you about that too. And I remember getting a phone call from I think it was Barry Greenspan at Drummers World in New York. Does that sound right? Did you used to go into Barry's shop? I think you did.
Absolutely. I was Barry. I love Barry. Yeah, I was always in that shop.
Yeah, and it was Barry that called me and said, and I know I'd heard your name, but I guess we just had never like met at any of the things that were happening in New York during those years, and but I definitely had heard your name, on the scene in New York, and Barry, I think he said, you should sign her up. I think she would sign up with, sign with you guys. And I remember we got in touch by telephone, and you came up to Zildjian, and I remember this about you too. What I admired and still admire to this day is that you were very dedicated to sound. You were kind of, I think, I don't want to say you were on the fence, but you wanted to make sure you could find the sounds that you had in your head, and you weren't, it wasn't like, oh, Zildjian's going to sign me up to an endorsement. Yippee, I'm going to go. You were great. You were like, yeah, I'd love to come up and check out some cymbals. And I realized, like you when I heard you play, and you had a definite sound in your head of like what you were looking for, and that makes it easy too. When the person that comes in the room knows what they're looking for. The hard part is hopefully we have that sound, but I think you did. I think we did at that time. And it was the beginning of a great friendship that I'm so proud to say continues today. But I just want to say, and I'll stop talking in a minute, but it was like a year later, 1993. This is what I recall, turning on MTV, and it was one of those spring break parties or something, and there's Lenny Kravitz, and there's you playing, and I'm
that was like my first gig, Florida gig.
Yeah, and it was like must have been taped, because I called you like the next day or a couple of days later, and I said, Cindy, are you playing with Lenny Kravitz? And you went like, mm-hmm. But you were so humble about it. You weren't like, yeah. It was just like, yeah, I am. That's what I remember anyway. And would you mind sharing the story of how that came about, playing with Lenny, the sort of audition that you had?
Oh, sure, absolutely. It's really funny because I was at the time dating Wallace Roney, the great trumpet player who God rest his soul, rest in peace. He passed. His brother Antoine. Yeah. Great saxophone player as well. And, we're still like brother and sister to this day. He was good friends with Lenny. In fact, he recorded something with Lenny. And so he said to me one day, he said, you know this guy, Lenny Kravitz? And I said, no. Have you ever heard his music? And I said, no. You own any Miles Davis records? No, I haven't heard it. You play with Tony? I haven't heard him. That's my criteria. But he was telling me that Lenny was looking for a drummer, and he had been looking for like a year and a half. And he said, I don't have his number, but he calls me every now and then. And next time he calls, if he's still looking for a drummer, would you be interested in checking him out? And he said he likes Gretsch drums and Kay Zildjian cymbals. And I said, wow, he's got ears. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
That was important to me because I realized that he could hear, in a manner that was similar to what I thought was the greatest thing on the planet. So that gave me, a kind of a familiarity with him already. And I learned from Antoine that he was the husband of Lisa Bonet. And I'm like, okay, I know Lisa Bonet because I watched The Cosby Show. So, all right, yeah. And maybe about 6 months later, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, something like that. Antoine called me. He says, I got my friend Lenny on the line. You want to talk to him? He's still looking for a drummer. And I said, okay. And Lenny got on the line. He was very nice, you know, was a very nice person. And he asked me if I had drums set up in my house. And I said, yes. And he asked me to play. So I put the phone down and I started playing. And, you know, I went back to the phone after about 5 or 6 minutes. And I said, could you make anything out? Was that clear? Because, you know, you're talking about a small phone speaker, and I wasn't playing soft, you know, necessarily.
No.
He said, yeah, I can hear it. I'm in LA. Can you fly out here right now? So he had somebody call me. They got me a ticket. I left like 6 a.m. the next morning, tired, you know, I was kind of got there with jet lag, got to LA. And surprisingly enough, he came and picked me up at the airport himself. Wow. You know, I was surprised. And I didn't know who he was, but when I saw this person, I knew that it was him because he had the big dreadlocks and the, you know, the clothing and the shoes and, you know, the leather pants. I'm like, that's got to be him. So, you know, we left the airport and he took me first to his mother's house. I think she was living in Bel Air, and he took me there, and I didn't know where we were going, but we drove up and he says, yeah, this is my mom's house. And so she opens the door and I'm like, Roxy Roker is your mother? Oh my God, my mind was blown because I love her, you know? And to my joy, she was just as nice as I imagined her to be. She was so sweet. You know, the sweetness that you see on that TV show that she was on, Good Times, was that plus in person. I mean, she was incredible. I fell in love with her as a person right away. You know, I thought, this woman is amazing. So, you know, I get to meet her, and then he actually drove me to a casting that he was doing. He did some casting for some movie. And then we went to the house that he was staying at, this house that Rick Rubin had just purchased. And there was nothing in it. It was barren. And they took me downstairs to where the audition or rehearsal was going to be. I didn't know if it was an audition or what. I just knew we were going to play. I just figured it was a jam session. And the instruments hadn't arrived yet from SIR. And maybe about an hour into me sitting there by myself, because I didn't know anybody, you know, I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs and sitting there. I see these people start to walk in the door, and I see this one guy come in and he had a bass drum pedal. Somebody had a stick bag. Another person had a cymbal. I'm like, that's a weird way to bring the drums in. I thought, wait a minute, these are not drums. These are drummers. This is an audition. There were like 40 drummers there, you know, that showed up to audition. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to just chill out for a minute. So I went outside by the pool, which had no water in it, but there was a lawn chair out there. And so I got in this lawn chair that had a bunch of leaves on it. You know, I took a bunch of leaves off, and I laid down, and I fell asleep actually, because I had jet lag. I'd been up most of the night, and, you know, the long flight, I couldn't really sleep. And his assistant came out, Deborah, and she says, Cindy, Lenny started already. He's looking for you. He wanted you to play first. I said, oh, okay. So I went and I played, and he had everybody play. They had a tape loop going of his song, Are You Gonna Go My Way, which was getting ready to come out. It wasn't out yet, but that was the single that was coming out for that record. And so he had everybody play that, and he had everybody play, I guess, what did I play? A blues and something else. I don't remember what. So one drummer had played already. I came in and I played, and he actually called the audition off. He says, okay, I choose Cindy. And I walked out of the room, and his manager came in, and I believe that his manager said, dude, you got like 38 other people out there, 39 people, you know, that's not fair. You know, you gotta hear them. So he heard all of them. And I was just kind of wandering around the grounds, and he found one guy that he liked. And there was another person coming in who called, even though they said, don't come, because we're pretty set on Cindy. He said, I'm coming anyway. He was flying in from London. This drummer, Mike Lee.
Oh, sure, yeah.
He had the other drummer, I forget who the drummer was that he liked, but he had that guy play, me play. We played, opposite each other. So he would play a song, I play a song, he play a song. And Lenny said, okay, I like Cindy still. And so then Michael came and he had us do the same thing. And he chose me as well. And, I have to say, rest in peace to Michael Lee. He's a great drummer. I loved his drumming. He ended up playing with Robert Plant. And we toured with them. We toured opposite them because Robert opened up for Lenny on a European tour that we did. And Michael was such a nice guy. So God bless him. He passed really early.
He did.
But anyway, that's how that happened. And I ended up staying for 2 weeks. I had packed for 2 days, which is what Lenny said to do. He said, I'm just going to have you here for a couple of days and then I'll send you home, no strings attached. So I had the same clothes that I had to wash out, and same clothes for 2 weeks, and eating pizza that they were tossing down to me in the basement while I was learning the songs, and we rehearsed.
Wow.
Then we did Are You Gonna Go My Way at the end of that, which was my first video with him.
Right. Yes. Right.
And it was about a.
I was just going to say, and had you had a chance to hear this when you played that for the audition? Were you hearing it for the first time? Like, were you kind of just hearing it and going, "Okay, I'm going to just pick up the vibe of this song and play it"? Or
yeah, I was hearing it for the first time. I hadn't heard that because it wasn't out, and they didn't send me any music or play anything before. He just had that running on loop, so it was just playing, over and over again, so people could hear it. So I just played it, the way I was feeling it. And then after the shoot, which was like a 16-hour shoot or something like that, 18 hours, something, he and his manager and his assistant and the rhythm section at the time, Craig Ross and Tony Bright on bass, they walked me outside, and Lenny said, so you want to join my band? And I said, yeah, when do we start? And he started laughing. He said, we started 2 weeks ago. You got a good sense of humor. He's like, yeah, we started 2 weeks ago.
Oh man. Wow. What a great situation that was for you for so long, for like 15 years or so.
I did 17 years because I went back. I played with him in 2014 and 2015 as well.
That's right. So I forgot. Yeah.
For 17 years altogether. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What a great run. And that was after and so in 2014, 15, you had already started playing with Carlos. So you were able to sort of fit that into an already busy gig schedule. And that's
well,
cool.
I wasn't touring with Carlos. I would go with him. Because at that point we were married. We got married in 2010. So if I was on a tour, let me fix that. If I was on the tour, I would sit in. But okay. I wasn't a part of the band at that point, but he would just have me come up and sit in. Then he asked me to actually join the band because he went through some drummer changes, and in 2016, he asked me to join the band. So I've been a band member since 2016.
Okay. No, that's great. And I saw you that year. I don't know why. I knew Dennis, of course, had been doing it. By the way, yesterday was Dennis's birthday. Shout out to Dennis Chambers.
Happy birthday, Dennis.
Happy birthday. And Charlie Drayton and Will Kennedy all share the same birthday.
Oh, my goodness. Happy birthday, guys.
Yeah. Every year I send a group text to those guys for their well, not just once a year, but anyway, it's always one year I was a day late and Will Kennedy said, we've been sitting here waiting for your text, man. It's kind of funny, but anyway. But I was just going to say, I don't know why I thought it was, I knew you guys got married in 2010 and I thought it was not long after that. I knew had been sitting in, and I thought you started playing with him around that time, but my mistake. Yeah. So 2016.
No, we didn't. And it's funny because Carlos said that because I subbed for Dennis in a gig, which was the first time I actually played with Santana. And later he said, I was, when I was going through drummer changes, I was thinking about hiring you, and some of the guys in my camp said, "Oh no, don't hire her. You're married." you're in a relationship, that won't work. Don't do it. Don't hire her. It's not going to work. And so I listened. He says, but I don't want to listen to that. He says, how do you feel about it? You know? And so then I'm like, well, I think that we would know if it's not working, then we won't do it. You know,
Yeah.
we're mature. And for me, and I like to say this regardless of my situation, my marital situation, but just for people to know, the bandstand is a sacred place. You know, for me, it's like prayer. It's like heavy meditation. You know, not that I'm thinking of praying or meditating when I'm playing. I'm thinking about the music, and my devotion is to the music. But to me, there's such a spiritual connection that happens that's what's really going on. You know, so that's a sacred space for me, and I don't take that lightly at all, no matter whose bandstand it is. It's a really important space. So, you know, it works out for us because, you know, we both have that same kind of understanding about the bandstand, and we both have that same kind of understanding for each other in terms of space. You know.
Yeah. Yep. That's wonderful, Cindy. That's so refreshing and such wonderful insight. And I think that comes from obviously both of you being, mature adults and professionals, that respect the music. And like you said, the bandstand is a sacred place. When you're there, you put everything else, I don't want to say everything else aside, but I mean, like, if there was some weird negative energy that happened to be happening between the two of you, you'd both be able to go there and play a great gig. It wouldn't get in the way of that. That's, with the mindset that you guys take on, and I can't imagine anything negative, but
Actually, negative is a very rare occasion in this house. And I say I'm very happy about that. I have a partner who's who's very much into peace and joy, like I am, so, and then that's a good thing. So those are not moments that we have experienced very much at all
that's great.
and we'll be 13 years in December.
Wow. Fantastic. God bless you guys. Yeah, and I know you really well, and from what I know of Carlos, I see that exactly what you're saying. The same thing. It's only positive vibes and energy you ever feel from him. From the things that he says and does. It's like you guys. You're the perfect match. You really are. You're just like perfect.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, it's also the way that you ingest something and the way that you put something out, because things are the way that we interpret something, and the energy that we allow something to have is the energy that's going to be emitted. So, if there's something to discuss, and of course there's things to discuss, but it depends on how you approach that topic, how you approach the conversation. Do you get upset about something and start yelling? Yeah, that could happen. Yeah, that's happened. But do you take that and turn that into a conversation that can happen in a mature way, in a way that's good for the benefit of all? So for me, I'm very picky and choicey about the way that I say things, because I want things to come out a certain way. So I'm very careful to choose the way that I say them, to make sure that things come out, not as reactive, but as, helpful for the situation.
Yeah. Great words of advice,
That's what I try to do.
Look before you leap. I want to just read a couple of comments. There's so many great comments, and there have been some questions I've sort of skipped past. And I apologize to all you folks. I just didn't. This conversation has been so fantastic. I didn't want to interrupt it. I'm going to just, if you don't mind, Cindy, I'm going to just read a couple of the questions, and we'll start to wrap things up, because I know we could stay here all day doing this. All right, so let me just jump in here to the feed for 1 second. All right. Anthony Cusinas question, Cindy, since Tony Williams was such a big influence in your playing, how were you able to break away from another clone to finding your own voice? Good question.
It's like you take the things that you love from the heroes that you listen to, and first you're going to play them as much in exact form as you can, and then you turn them around, you play them backwards, you turn them inside out, and you do something different with them. You play them on a different part of the drum, and when you start to do that, then you start to hear different things. You start to hear other things, you know. So that's what I do. Sometimes I think of, okay, what did Tony play on that turnaround right there? Okay, he played this on that turnaround right there. Well, how about if in that turnaround spot, I understand why he needed to do that there, but I'm going to do this there. So I'm going to do something there to push or pull that music, give it what it needs at that moment, but I'm going to do this instead. Or you know what, I'm going to do that because I still like it. I always love it. But,
yeah.
You can change things around. So it's just about how you think about and how you process, what you're hearing from Tony or any drummer that you love.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, at a much lower, 100-foot level where I am, as opposed to you, I think what you're saying is exactly true. That you can love someone's playing and it can be a huge influence, but it doesn't mean that that every fill that you choose to play is going to be what Tony would have played. It's like things might remind you, like something that Tony does reminds you of this, and you play this because it's in that same sort of vocabulary, right? But it's not a lick for lick, because I've seen you enough to know that you have that influence, but you are your own person. You have your own style, the way you play. And
thank you.
Amazing.
It gets harder with Tony when you start to because he was so studied, like there were a couple times when I would take a Tony thing and I turned it around and I played it differently. I'm like, oh shoot, that's Philly Joe. Okay, that's so-and-so. Okay, now I got to do something else with it, because he already turned it around and made it that. It's pretty funny.
That's great. That is great. A friend of mine who runs a Facebook page called Dawson's Disciples, my friend Mike Powers, great drummer, is asking, would love for Cindy to participate in some stories. Oh, well, you're not on Facebook though, right? I don't think you are.
I have a Facebook page. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'd love to participate in some stories. Sure.
Okay. Well, maybe when you and I can talk about it offline, and I can connect you guys and make that happen. That would be great. I think that would be wonderful if you were able to do that. Great.
Be awesome.
Yeah. Dave Patrick said, Cindy is doing great honor to Tony's legacy. She's such a fine musician on her own as well. Amen. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I saw Buddy Williams had jumped on here for a second, and I was going to.
Buddy!
Yeah, I know. I love Buddy. And Cindy, outstanding musician. Enough said.
Oh, wow. That's an honor. It's awesome.
I know. The great Buddy Williams, who will be on one of these future episodes as well. Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. Well, so as far as right now, are there some projects you're working on? I know you're going to be on tour with Santana this summer, probably.
Yes, we're going to do some. It's a light touring year. We toured like crazy last summer. This is a light Santana touring year, so I'll be splitting my touring with doing some Santana stuff and doing some stuff with my band.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. I was going to ask you that. Fantastic. Yeah. And that'll be. Will that be like in the summer or in the fall or?
Summer. Yeah, we have a couple things in the fall, but mainly we're doing stuff in the summer. We start up in June. The first gig is the 11th in Napa at the Napa Blue Note.
Great.
We're going to do the San Jazz Festival. We're going to do Saratoga. We're going to do Bethesda Blues and Jazz Club in Maryland. And I have actually the day that I do Saratoga, it worked out so well. My band plays at like noon or 12:30 or something. We play our set. And then I hop in a car and drive a couple of hours to catch up to the Santana tour. And I do a Santana gig.
All
That's going to
right.
be a fun day.
Yeah, that's going to be. You're in shape to do that. Where a lot of us would be, you know. Yeah, that's great. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So then we have, we have some other, the rest of Santana stuff, and then my band starts back up again in August, and we do play Birdland in New York. I've never played Birdland before, so that's going to be fun. We do
Wow,
Jimmy
yeah.
in New Hampshire, which is a great club, so much fun. That's also great. We do Keystone Corner as well in Baltimore, and that's great too. The great Todd Barkin celebrating his birthday.
Oh, fantastic! And the gig in New Hampshire, is that in? Do you know what city that's in? Is that in? Is it in? Do you know if
That's
it's
in,
is it Manchester or Portsmouth?
it's in Portsmouth.
Portsmouth. Okay. All right. I'm gonna look that up, and I'll put a link, Cindy, to your website when we put this up, so people can presumably they can see tour dates or find tour dates. I'm guessing on there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. Well, no, this has been great, and it's been such a pleasure to catch up with you today and do this. And I'm just going to take one more quick look through to see Steve Ford. Cindy is Cindy still playing Gretsch drums? Of course she is. I'll answer that
Yes,
for you.
yes, I am.
Yes. Well, there's many great comments and so much love for you, including myself. And I thank you so much for being here today, Cindy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Johnny D. It's always a pleasure. You are one of my favorite people. I'm so glad that we're able to be in touch. And, I've always had a great reverence and respect and love for you as my dear friend. And so this is an honor. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you. The pleasure is all mine and the honor is all mine. And I thank you again. You're the best. Thank you. All right. Well, if you'll sit with me for 1 minute, I'll end the live show. We'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. Cindy Blackman Santana. Wow. Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. That's my show. Thanks for listening. You can watch episodes of Live from My Drum Room live in real time on Facebook Live by following my Facebook page, Live from My Drum Room with John DeChristopher, and also my YouTube channel, Live from My Drum Room with John DeChristopher. And while you're there on YouTube, check out my new show, Track Talk, iconic songs with iconic drum parts and the drummers who created them. It's really cool. Check it out. Shorter episodes. You'll love it. And Track Talk is only available as part of my Live from My Drum Room series on my Live from My Drum Room YouTube channel and podcast platforms. So please subscribe. All Live from My Drum Room and Track Talk podcasts are available on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc. Also want to give a big thanks to my friend Steve Gadd for providing the music for my show. That's really Steve. And remember, no drummers are harmed during any episodes of Live from My Drum Room or Track Talk. So drummers, remember, when in doubt, leave it out, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.